The following will contain spoilers to both Klonoa, Door to Phantomile, and Klonoa 2, Lunatia's Veil. If you don't want me to spoil the entirety of the game series, please come back after beating the entire Fantasy Reverie series to hear my personal opinions. If not, enjoy the video. Hey guys, this is the Unlucky AngelStar, and we're back continuing our retrospective on the Klonoa series. If you haven't checked out my last video, I actually did a rundown on the first Klonoa series, both the original and the remake. Though the Klonoa series is not really that obscure, it's kinda crazy that the first title on both versions goes for quite a lot of money on the internet. Which is also ironic considering Door to Phantomile was a surprisingly great success, even getting a few awards of being best platformer. I mean, the game itself was so much of a success, Namco decided to finally make it a long-awaited sequel and a spin-off series, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. In fact, Sony actually really liked Klonoa so much that you could kinda say Klonoa was sort of like a PlayStation IP of both Sony and Namco, which is why most of the mainline games have been mostly exclusive on the PlayStation. And you'll probably see why when I talk about Klonoa 2, Lunatia's Veil. Klonoa 2, Lunatia's Veil, released exclusively on the PlayStation 2 in 2001. The game was developed and published by Namco themselves, and also Sony was a secondary publisher, which is why Klonoa 2 is exclusive to the PS2. At least until Fantasy Reverie gives us the long-awaited remake of the sequel. With Klonoa moving to the next generation of consoles, of course there were a lot of things they had to improve upon that were in the sequel. And considering this is a sequel, it takes place right after the first game, which I explained in my last video, had Klonoa leaving Phantomile. And this time around we're entered in the land of Lunatia. The game begins just like the last game, ironically enough. The wind ring begins slowly falling from the sky, and you see words explaining something related to what's going to be the basis of our new world in this game, Lunatia's Veil. Klonoa in a brand new outfit before, he starts drowning. Hopefully this doesn't lead to some new character development, until he's rescued by a girl named Lolo and a dog with Chaos Emeralds jammed into his eyes, Popka. And unlike the first game, where you're secretly told what a dream travel is, Lolo mentions Klonoa is a dream traveler and asks for his help ringing a bell on an island, which begins our first vision of the game. And just playing the game itself, it plays just like the first game, using the D-pad or analog stick, depending on your choices, to move around, pressing the X button to jump and holding it to hover, and the O button to use the wind ring, to inflate enemies, which you can use as projectiles or as a double jump. Also, late in the game, I actually learned there's a button where you can actually do taunts. After navigating through the level and helping Lolo, we're introduced to a fortune teller named Baguji, who foretells of a dream traveler, aka Klonoa, appearing in the land of Lunatia, in order to ring the bells of the four kingdoms in order to save Lunatia from the threat of the Kingdom of Sorrow. So Klonoa, along with the help of Lolo and Popka, go on a journey to save the day. When making a video game sequel, a lot of times the franchise has to expand upon the ideas of the original. And I think it does that pretty well. We technically learn what a dream traveler is. Not really that well, but my understanding, a dream traveler is a being that's destined to protect the dream world from nightmares and total destruction. And the form Klonoa takes is actually us traveling through dreamscapes to protect the balance of the dream worlds. We also learn some very interesting things about the wind ring as well, such as its ability to store items and people within it, as Lolo and Popka, and another item will be talked about in the game, we see from time to time enter and exit the wind ring. Though we did also see this with HuPao and Klonoa, it actually makes now a lot more sense of why HuPao is capable of doing it. We also learn that Klonoa needs a being from the dream world in order to fire wind bullets. At least in the mainline games, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. And that's where Lolo comes in, who is actually a priestess in this world, well, priestess in training, and after helping her, we actually make her become a priestess full-time, and give her the mission along with Klonoa to actually save the world. And Lolo is my favorite thing about this game. We see Lolo wants to become a priestess, and she does succeed thanks to Klonoa, but we see she isn't the most competent person to save the world. And we see that growth within the fourth world of the game. She feels useless and feels as if she doesn't deserve the title of priestess, and admits to her mistakes. And the bond that she develops with Klonoa throughout this entire journey, I think is more authentic than with HuPao back in the first game. He starts off as this really helpful, friendly character who feels incompetent, and then she shows that she has what it takes to really help out in certain situations. It's understandable why she's so popular, and it's probably the reason why she reappears in future incarnations of the Klonoa universe. But before we talk about the world of Lunatia and the characters within it, I should probably explain more of the gameplay. As stated before, the gameplay is fairly the same, and the enemies you see actually do return. Of course, like things like Moose, Teton, etc. But there also exist some brand new enemies that are exclusive into the world of Lunatia, such as the Keton, which are a superior version of the Teton, as when you pick them up, if you press the jump button repetitively, they actually do a helicopter jump until you throw them, or when they explode on their own. There's also the Urbil, who give Klonoa an extra jolt in his jumping ability, and I mean that quite literally. There's the Jetamo, which makes Klonoa skyrocket in the air, and trust me, this is really fun. And lastly, there is the Liquori. The Liquori I find very interesting, and a lot of people consider the worst enemy in the Klonoa series, mostly because of its unique gimmick. When you pick up a Liquori and throw it at enemies, it actually comes back at you like a boomerang, though they change colors. That's mostly a big deal because one of the things that will be blocking your path are these specific colored crystals that you need a specific Liquori to hit it with. Sometimes it leads to some of the most confusing platforming in the game, but honestly it's not that bad for me. All you have to do is just really think of which person to hit first and then find a way to navigate through the level using that specific enemy. It usually goes from yellow, blue to red. I really like the new things they do add in Klonoa. One of which is his new outfit, which goes from his classic red belt around his neck and red pants, this time around being fully blue. Another interesting thing is when Klonoa actually does extra jumps, he actually says new words besides WAHOO, only when you do chain jumps. And lastly, one of the newest mechanics within the game is the hoverboard. The hoverboard you actually find within the second world of the game. However, Popka manages to steal the hoverboard so Klonoa could use it to traverse the world. I find these levels really fun and entertaining, but sadly, one of the things that makes this not that great is because they're very short, lasting up to 3 minutes. The Klonoa series is fairly simple with its platforming levels, and yeah, I did mention that in the first game that it usually takes about a few hours to beat the game, but Lunatia's Veil actually did expand upon the platforming levels. Some people actually hate it, as some people state that it could take up to 20 minutes to beat an entire level, and personally, I don't think that's a bad thing. When making sequels that expand upon the gameplay, I think it's a good thing that it expands upon its levels as long as it does something different and unique with each level. And I think Klonoa 2 does that really well. Of course, you still get the classic collectibles like the jewels, which if you collect 100, you'll get an extra life. There's the extra life coins. Though in the last game, you had to rescue 6 citizens and bubbles with unique symbols based off the different species within the world of Phantomile. Instead, when you pop a bubble, that actually makes a living little doll appear that actually appear from a runaway circus. And by collecting as many as you can, you actually unlock some really cool collectibles, like concept art, like which I couldn't get, and a secret bonus level. The world of Lunatia is vast and very interesting. Though there are only 14 levels within the game, 15 if you count the bonus one, there are a total of 5 different kingdoms within the world of Lunatia. There's the Kingdom of Tranquility, La Lacusha, a peaceful land of nature and home of the priestesses, just like Lolo. The Kingdom of Joy, Joliant, an entire kingdom made into a theme park full of never-ending fun. The Kingdom of Discord, Volk, a factory-based city that seems to be in never-ending war. The Kingdom of Indecision, Miramira, is one giant museum out in the middle of a winter wonderland, probably in reference to another Klonoa game during the production of Lunatia's Veil. Hint, hint. Also, it has the best song in the Klonoa series. Lastly, the Kingdom of Sorrows, Euponia, the lost kingdom that is said to bring Lunatia to ruin. But before that, I should probably mention the rest of the story. When trying to ring all 4 bells to get the 4 elements within the kingdoms, stopping us on our travels is the sky pirate Lirina, I don't think I'm pronouncing that right, and her little sidekick Tat. We actually learned that Lirina was formerly a priest in training, but left her training to find true strength. In order to do so, she manages to make a copy of Klonoa's wind ring in order to awaken the lost kingdom of sorrow by ringing the fabled 5th bell. Ironically enough, where we began the game, we fail to stop her from ringing the bell, and the entire ocean disappears, leading towards the kingdom of sorrow. Weird that you find it in the ocean. You could say it was hiding in Lunatia's Veil? I'll shut up now. We take chase, and Lirina gets corrupted by either the replica ring or the elements of the bells, and we decide to take her down. We save her life, and she realizes her mistake and helps us to the Kingdom of Sorrow. And trust me to say, these last few levels put your platforming to the test, adding that extra difficulty curve that I've been really missing in the first game. But inside, we meet the King of Sorrow, who turns out was actually Baguji. and the voice Klonoa has been hearing throughout the game, asking for help. He states that ignoring sorrow is Lunatia's greatest sin and wants to spread it throughout the dream world, thus taking us to our final boss fight with the King of Sorrow. It's a two-phaser with the first half on the hoverboard, and the second half being surprisingly easier than the first half. Even though we win the fight, Klonoa doesn't defeat the King of Sorrow, but instead saves him from it, the very thing he summoned Klonoa to do. Klonoa rings the final bell and creates harmony throughout Lunatia. And in the credits, we see that the King of Sorrows was resurrected as a baby. Aww. In the end, we see Klonoa, Lolo, and Popka just watching the ocean, and Lolo decides to continue studying harder to become a proper priestess, even giving up that title, showing that Lolo has grown quite a lot since meeting Klonoa. But sadly, like the first game, Klonoa has to say farewell to his new friends, and everything gets so emotional as Lolo hugs Klonoa, crying for him not to go. But unlike the first game, Klonoa leaves on his own terms, but not without saying some heartwarming final words, showing he's matured so much after the first game, and has taken the responsibilities of a dream traveler. Of course, just like in the last game, there is some endgame stuff, and by collecting those little voodoo dolls, you unlock concept art of the game, as well as a secret level and a timed boss rush, which actually got into the remake of Door to Phantomile. Klonoa 2 Lunatia's Veil improves on the level design and develops more of what made Door to Phantomile so investing. Though levels can take longer for some, I think the game has the perfect balance for those new and those returning to the series. The game was well regarded and praised for its gameplay at the time, but for unknown reasons, Namco never made a Klonoa 3 after 20 years of silence for the main titles. I mean, they did try to bring him back a few years later, and there were even plans for Lunatia's Veil to get a remake as well. But we already know how that turned out. Luckily, Klonoa will no longer be lost to obscurity, as Namco is finally remaking both mainline games on multiple platforms, even learning from the mistakes of better advertising, and there's nothing that's better advertising than a Nintendo Direct if you ask me. I actually consider Klonoa 2 to be one of the best games on the PlayStation 2, and I'm really happy I actually have a physical copy of this game. I only found for $30, and I'm really excited that people are finally going to experience a title that most have probably never played. You know, unless they wanted to pull out a loan. Though this was the last mainline title of the Klonoa series, there's still one more video on this Klonoa retrospective, so tune in next time as I talk about the final Klonoa retrospective video on the Klonoa spin-off games, cause trust me, Klonoa gets even weirder.